most of the young cast in this show have not acted for screen before. So that was a huge consideration.
How did Owen slam dunk? How did he win you over?
Yeah.
What was it? What did he do in the final audition where you're like, Eureka? Hi, I'm Anthony D'Alessandro from Deadline, and this is Crew Call Live. We are here today with Netflix limited series Adolescence, which is up for 13 Emmy nominations. We are here today with the show's casting director. She is celebrating her first Emmy nomination in a near 3-decade career. Shaheen Baig. Hi, how are you?
Hi, thanks for having me.
Adolescence is a crime drama filmed in an ambitious real-time one-shot. It tells the story of how a family's world is turned upside down when their 13-year-old son, Jamie Miller, played by Owen Cooper, is arrested for the murder of a teenage girl who goes to his school. Stephen Graham plays Jamie's father. Eddie Miller, Ashley Walters stars as Detective Inspector Bascom, and Erin Doherty is Bryony Ariston, the clinical psychologist assigned to Jamie's case. Shaheen, tell us about how you started off as a casting director. Did you go to drama school? Did you study acting and then it bridged to working in the casting office?
Not at all. No, I was very, very interested originally in photography. I suppose out of all the visual arts, that was the one that was my sort of main passion. And I left school and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I moved from the north of England to London and sort of scrambled around a little bit doing various jobs and thought, okay, what am I going to do? And photography was sort of like, that's what I wanted to explore. And then I sort of took myself back to college. So I didn't go to university and do like further education. And I started to think more about film production. So I was really passionate about cinema. I didn't really understand the job of a casting director at that point. So I ended up getting work experience with a producer. He was working in cinema. And that's really how I started. So I worked for a film producer and a writer for about 2 years. And during that process, I learned a huge amount and I sort of started to understand all the different departments. And then through that, I thought, okay, I'm not quite cut out to be a producer's assistant, but I was really interested in the casting department. Because I watched loads and loads of films, I was like, okay, this is interesting to me. And then I heard that a casting director was looking for an assistant, and it's the brilliant Debbie McWilliams who casts all the James Bond films. And so I just wrote to her and I said, I'm looking for a job. I'd never done this before, but I really love film. I think I know a lot about film. And I went to meet her. And because I watched a lot of European cinema, I think that was good. That was a bonus because I think with James Bond, they shoot all over the world and often all over Europe. And she offered me a job. And so that was my first entry into casting. And I was an assistant to Debbie and then another casting director called Gina J, Patsy Pollitt, these kind of amazing casting directors. And I was an assistant for approximately 8-9 years. And then I set up on my own.
What's some of the wisdom that they gave you as you came up that is still true today?
Definitely through the casting directors that I trained with is really to just focus on the work and keep your head down and do the work to the best of your ability, because there's a lot of stuff and nonsense that surrounds this industry, and not to get caught up in that and really just to focus on doing your work the very best you can, and that go into each job and truly educate yourself about who are you working with, you know, understand the project, understand the character, understand where the writer's coming from, where the director's coming from. And it's really that. I think that's what, you know, all of, you know, Debbie, Gina, Patsy, serve the story as best you possibly can.
Actors and actresses come in many different shapes and sizes. And what I mean by that specifically is you can have someone who's very talented, but may not have the confidence. Yeah. How do you work in a situation like that?
I think that it's really important for me that the audition room isn't this sort of fixed space. I think it has to shape and be loose and mold to the actor that's coming in. I want actors to feel safe coming into the room and to trust the casting director, because we want them to do the very best they can. But also in an audition, it's just a sketch. It's not the final thing. And I'm never looking for a complete audition because that doesn't exist. I'm looking for a sketch of something so I can see an element of what they might do on the day. And we just play around. We play around with stuff.
One of the common things you might hear from an actor and actress coming away from an audition is, when I think I did excellent, I don't land the part. But when I thought, when I came away and I thought I did awful, I land the part. How do you explain that?
It's so difficult to explain why somebody does and doesn't get the role, because it can come down to, it sounds simplistic, but it can come down to chemistry. And that's the relationship with the camera. Sometimes if you're screen testing with another actor, and of course actors are always looking for the answer. They want it to be defined. And it could just be, if you're creating a family, they don't quite feel like they're part of the family. And also sometimes you can just have quite a strong instinctive reaction towards a certain performance. And so it's always very, very hard, because actors often look for very specific feedback. But sometimes, they could have done a fantastic read, and often they do. It's just in that moment, we're looking at the ensemble we're putting together, and it's like, who fits into that ensemble and what feels perhaps more coherent on that particular production.
How did Adolescence come to you?
So I have worked with lots of people on the team of Adolescence before. So go right back to the beginning of my career when I started casting on my own, solo. Warp Films were very involved and have been hugely supportive of me since the beginning of my career. So Warp Films, Matriarch, which is Stephen and Hannah, I've worked with before, and also Plan B, I've worked with a number of times. So they've all been involved in my career at some point. And also Jack Thorne, I've worked on a number of his productions. So that it sort of came to me probably a good 6 months, I think, before filming. But I knew a lot of the people involved.
The production's decision to shoot this in one shot, tell me about what that thinking was. Clearly, it puts a challenge, it puts a stress, it puts an immediacy on the performance, and a nuance and an honesty right there in that minute. But what was it when you were reading the script? What was going through your mind in terms of the types of performers you would need for this?
Well, I'd seen that Phil and Stephen had worked with the one shot before on Boiling Point, on the little feature of Boiling Point. So, that was extraordinary. And so I was really confident that I didn't sort of question that they would be able to pull that off. I think in terms of the casting, it was like, okay, we need a sort of almost like a troupe, or like a theatre troupe. We need a troupe of live. It needs to feel live all the time. And actors that are also comfortable, perhaps with a little bit of improvisation, because anything could go wrong at any time and you have to just run with it. Not all actors like to improvise. Mm-hmm. So that was definitely a consideration. And also just thinking, okay, there needs to be a really careful flow. It needs to feel really precise, but also very, very relaxed and loose at the same time. I sort of had to take that on board throughout all the different elements of the casting, predominantly the young cast, because most of the young cast in this show have not acted for screen before. So that was a huge consideration. And so when we were, searching and recalling, we had to feel confident that they were able to sort of take that on.
You had 6 months to cast?
It was approximately 6 months. So I think I was sent the script 6 months before. I think actually it was a bit less time. So it was maybe 4 months to cast.
Is that stressful for a casting director? Or have you worked on a shorter kind of timeline?
There's never enough time. And so you have to work with the time you've got. You have to find the solution. So whether you have a year or 6 months or 4 months, that's what you have to work with. So I think, because on Adolescence, we knew we were shooting in the north of England. It was location specific in that I was focused on 4 or 5 cities in the north of England. It gives you more clarity. It's not a nationwide search. We're looking for in particular places.
Of course, you'll go through talent agents to find the performers you're looking for, but you also go out on social media.
Yeah.
Tell me why that is. Why go outside of the industry scope?
I think, well, whenever you're doing a sort of casting search for young people, there's a combination of you're kind of scouring everywhere. You're looking at who exists in the system and that might be represented. But also, I think, all of us involved wanted to try and create opportunities as well on Adolescence, in front of and behind the camera. And it felt like a really lovely thing to open this out. And also, this is such a difficult role. And we just thought, okay, we need to search as far and wide as possible to find someone to play Jamie, because that's a huge undertaking. And we need to feel like, what's that expression? No stone unturned. I think that's what we felt we needed to do. The two ways of searching complement each other. So we absolutely sent a breakdown out to all the agents, but then I did a combination of, posting a casting call on social media, which can be very effective because it then gets passed on. We always, whenever we cast in this way, we kind of create a huge research document where we research all the areas we go into. And we spoke and sent flyers out to schools, youth clubs, sports clubs, community centres, places where, moms and dads, aunties and uncles might hang out. We sort of covered the whole lot. And then we also did street casting. So we went to all of those cities and you just pound the streets and you talk to people and you let them know what you're doing. And wow, this is a flyer. This is what we're looking for. Pass it on to your mates' kids or.
Wow.
So yeah, you try everything.
You were looking at kids 13 to 17 for the role of Jamie?
Yes.
Clearly you found Owen, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but it sounded like you were the deciding factor in whether the protagonist here is going to be 17 or 13.
Obviously, the character was written at a very specific age, but we thought, okay, we need to not be too narrow in our search because we needed to find the right person. So we started off looking between 13 and approximately 17 to just see. And also, if someone is older, it slightly changes how you can work with them. It's also very, very challenging material. Mm-hmm. So we needed to make sure that whoever we cast was able to sort of take that on board. But it became clear quite quickly that younger was far more effective. And also because the age of Jamie is such a huge story note, we wanted to try and stay as faithful to that as much as possible because it felt really important, the youth of the character. And so while we were looking, while we saw some really wonderful young actors who were like 16, 17, it didn't feel quite right for the part.
Was Jamie the first role that you cast?
Yes, although I was sort of casting the adults at the same time. So that was all happening at the same time as the search for Jamie. But while we were conducting the search for Jamie, we were also looking for all the other young roles as well.
And Jamie was by far the most challenging.
Yes.
What was in your head? What did the performer need to do? And then once Owen walked in the room, did he change your mind?
I think we were all, as a team, pretty united on what we were looking for.
Yeah.
And we wanted a young person who, there was nothing obvious about them. When you looked at them, they just felt like a really regular child. Mm-hmm. And that they didn't sort of display any immediate complications or complexities, that they had a clarity. And I think that, in the process of casting in this way, people sent us little tapes where they'd talk about themselves, and then we'd send them little scenarios, get them to send us another tape, and then we'd give them little improvisations to make up. And so everybody went through 4, 5, 6 auditions. And then we sort of finally got down to like a workshop stage where we pulled in a much smaller amount of people to come in and work with some actors. We tried scenes, we improvised around scenes. And then we got to the final stage, which was with Stephen, was workshopping with Stephen. But there were several rounds to get through before we got to that stage.
So were some of the kids in the classroom, were they potential candidates to play Jamie?
Well, we actually ended up for Jamie with a short list of 5 young actors. And none of whom had acted on screen before. And they were all amazing in many different ways. You know, they were all fantastic. And we were like, okay, Jamie, we could go in that direction or that direction. And actually, we were in a very privileged position because that rarely happens. Often you're like, there's one person for the role and that's it. But then obviously it was not just about finding someone that was right for Jamie. It was finding someone who was able to cope with, you know, shooting in this manner. And we decided, I think, in that final workshop process with Stephen, that whoever got the role, we were going to make sure we gave the other 4 a part in the show, which is what we did.
How did Owen slam dunk? How did he win you over? Yeah. What was it? What did he do in the final audition where you're like, Eureka?
I think that Owen, you know, and I've talked a lot about his confidence and his focus and his sort of resilience to keep, you know, repetition, trying it lots of different ways. But it's also his talent. You know, you can have all of those skills, but you have to have talent. And I think Owen displayed that from his very, very first tape. He just listened. He really, really listened. He listened to Phil. He listened to Stephen. He kind of lent into what Stephen was doing. And he concentrated, and he made it feel very instinctive. And also, you know, he looked very young and very sort of sweet. He had clarity. He had a sort of openness that felt very, very natural. And so combining all of those things, plus his ability to just keep going, felt very rare.
In that first episode, like we want to believe that he's innocent.
Yeah.
That could play kind of innocence, but also there's that undertone of doubt where we as the viewer are like, yeah, but did he really do it? Were you looking for that, or was it no, have him play the innocence, you know, overtly?
I mean, it was something we discussed a lot, that quality.
Yeah.
But a lot of young people are hugely secretive. I mean, teenagers are hugely secretive. And so, you know, we met so many on this show and they give very, very little away. That was the joy in a way of going, okay, actually Owen isn't trying to hide things from us. He just naturally is quite private. And I think he is naturally quite a private actor, if that makes sense. And there was something really lovely about that just felt very true to being a 13, 14-year-old. You know, you don't want to give your parents all the information. But there was also a really lovely kind of innocence to him too. And he felt his age. And I think that is also one of the most effective things about his performance is he's not trying to play younger. He's just playing his age. And I think that's key, actually.
Now, for Stephen, he co-created this.
Yeah.
It was always his intention to play the father.
Absolutely.
Understood. Now, when it came to Erin Doherty, what made her prime to play the therapist?
We had worked with Erin on another show called 1,000 Blows, and she was amazing. Everybody had a really great time working with her. And we discussed lots of brilliant people for that role. And we kind of thought, okay, what are we looking for? And it's such a difficult episode 3. I mean, it's a 2-hander. And we just kept coming back to Erin. And also Erin has worked in the theatre a lot, which I think is a really kind of important skill when you're shooting in this way. And we all just felt really good about that decision. It was like some of us had worked with her before, but also her sort of power opposite Owen in that episode, we just felt would be really exciting to see, because she's a very strong performer. She's got quite a unique energy, I think, Erin. And we really wanted that sort of opposite Owen's sort of, especially in episode 3 where he's scrambling around trying to work out where he's at and what has he done.
And Ashley Walters.
Yeah.
Very empathetic. Why was he primed for the detective?
I think, again, with Ashley, like we all have a huge amount of love for Ashley. I've been working with Ashley for years. And you don't often see Ashley play roles like this. And so I think that was what we all got really excited about, was seeing Ashley in maybe a different way. And he's a hugely experienced actor. But it's like, okay, maybe we can see something in Ashley that the audience haven't seen before. And we all knew that he'd be extraordinary. So we were very, very happy when he said yes.
So for the children,
Yeah.
there is these heavy duty crime moments. Was it easy for them to get there? Did it take them a while? Some actors can and actresses can cry on cue. It's a brilliant talent. Was that a prerequisite? Like, they had to be able to cry on cue. Some of them can do it.
No, it wasn't. I think it was really finding young actors that could connect to the emotion in a very truthful way. And we got very, very lucky with Fatima, who plays Jade, because I think she's extraordinary. And I remember her audition. We spent a day in Leeds in the north of England, and we saw loads of people that day. And she came in and she just did an extraordinary audition. And again, in a similar way to Owen, she just had this focus and she was incredibly still. She sort of blew us away, and it was very moving what she did in that audition. So it was never really about you have to be able to emote, but we need to feel you're connecting emotionally to what's happening in this moment. And that will display in whatever way it wants to display.
Does a casting director's job end when they say roll camera, or does it continue?
It depends on the production. I think because Adolescence was shot in the way it was shot, we had to be fully cast by the read-through. That was a non-negotiable because we were rehearsing and we were doing tech runs and we were shooting, and so we had to have everybody sort of signed and sealed. There are lots of productions I work on where you're going throughout the whole, if it's multi-episodic, sometimes the scripts are still being finessed, so you're on it for the whole time. But then also as the casting team, when you're casting, particularly first people doing it for the first time, there's a duty of care. So that kind of continues throughout filming and after filming, because more often than not, you're the first point of contact for that young person or their family. So that relationship continues.
Can you share with us a lesson learned on one of the productions that you casted in the past where it was just a big learning experience?
I think that
a teachable moment.
Well, I think actually on Adolescence, there's a teachable moment, which is the well-being and care of the cast, particularly the young cast, I think is paramount on any production. And I think there's been a huge fashion in the last few years to cast in this way. Street casting, it's become very fashionable. And so whatever production I go on to, if the producer or the director's like, I want a street cast, I'm like, why do you want to street cast? Let's break that down, because I'm not going to street cast just because it's fashionable. It's like, why do you want to do it? Because there's lots of brilliant young people in the industry. Let's discuss the meaning behind that. But also, if you are going to cast in that way, it comes with a huge duty of care, not just in the run up to the shoot, but during the shoot and then what comes afterwards, because you are taking somebody out of their day-to-day life, whatever that may be, and however complex that might be, and you're putting them into an industry which is a million miles away from their day-to-day. So we have to look after them, and we have to make sure that when they go back to school, they're able to sort of fit back in, having had this kind of very otherworldly experience. So I think that, if anything, the lesson that particularly on Adolescence is really look after people, make sure they feel equipped to go back out to their regular life and school and study, whatever that might be, because I think it's really important. Who knows? I mean, obviously Owen has gone on to do more acting, but he may not have. He may have decided, I really love this experience, I don't want to do it again. And that's okay too. You just want them to have the best experience.
And also a casting director, as the actors pass into upper levels of auditioning, you help prep them and get them ready for each circle before. I think sometimes that gets lost. A lot of non-industry people don't know that.
Yeah.
And
I think also it's changing a little bit because of self-taping. And that's become a huge part of the industry, particularly through the pandemic. and it's sort of continued. And I think that's really hard on actors because often they're getting sides a couple of days before, they don't have any context. So I think it's definitely the casting team's responsibility to give an actor as much context as you can. Because, you get a side and it's like, well, what came before and what's coming after? I don't understand. And everyone's like, well, I can't give you any information. It's like, you can give some information. You may have to be careful with the information you give, but I want the actor to do the best take that they can do and feel confident. So what can I tell them? Whether it's like, I can't tell you any more, but look at the director's work. You'll get a sense of kind of their taste and style, or this is what we're trying to achieve with this scene, with this character in this moment. It's really important that we, however possible, kind of underpin the actor and make them feel like they can do their best work. My goal is for an actor to feel as confident and comfortable as possible, whether they're in the room or they're doing us a tape or we're on a Zoom, and whatever information we can give them to help them, then that's what we want to do.
Self-taping is here to stay?
It is. I think it is. Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
But yeah. I think that it's what we try and do as much as possible, especially if people have just graduated. It's like to see them in the room because they need to start off in the right way.
Right.
Because I think it can feel very isolating. You've just graduated and you've got 10 self-tapes to do. How do you know where to start? I think self-taping has been great for the industry because it's made it much fairer. And so people live far away and travel is really expensive. It's meant that more people can be considered for roles, which I think is a really great thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it slightly takes away the community aspect and the communication. And I think, I love meeting people in the room. And so we will do it as much as we possibly can.
It also takes away the paranoia, like, hey, that guy, he knows all of his lines, in the waiting room.
It becomes a little bit detached, I think, with the self-taping. But I also think there's great value to it as long as it's done with care.
Shaheen Baig, thank you so much. Nominated for Outstanding Casting in a limited or anthology series or movie. Your first Emmy nomination in a near 3-decade career. Also, Adolescence is up for 13 Emmy nominations, including Outstanding Anthology or Limited Series or Movie. In the acting category, we have Stephen Graham in lead. In supporting actress, we have Erin Doherty, Christine Tremarco, and supporting actor, we have Ashley Walters and Owen Cooper. I'm Anthony D'Alessandro from Deadline, and this has been Crew Call Live with Netflix's Adolescence. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Crew Call podcast on Deadline. Make sure you subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode.